And I think you made a point about, is the credit card a tool, right? Or literally, is the bank using you as the tool?
Hey, there you go. If you guys are watching this and you guys are loving this, make sure you guys like, share, and comment. We're gonna go into part 2 right now, which is, let's start about the beginning. So now we are 18, 16, 14, and we are talking about like life. Like
Right.
You're now financially independent. You are no longer a dependent of your mom and dad. You are now a independent person.
Right.
So let's talk about it. Like, we're talking about like, what are things that we need to teach our kids? And this is like, I think the important part of this episode is really focusing on what are some things that we can get kids to start thinking about now,
Yes.
so they can be prepared. Or if you are in your 20s, 30s, or even 40s, and what are some things you should have learned that now we can start implementing
Yes.
and fast track you to catch up where you should be?
Yes, and that's important because, so both sides. So the first, thing number one is budget, right? It's so crazy to think about, back to our comment about what we don't learn in school, right? And they used to have home ec classes and all the stuff where you learn some things back in the day, right? That doesn't happen anymore. I'm not sure what, we're focused on the math.
Yep. Just focus on the math.
We're not doing that great at the math either, but anyway, that's another story. But at the end of the day, there's a few things, when you talk about creating a budget, the big thing is just figuring out where your money's going, especially nowadays.
Yep.
Right? Before you used to have checkbook ledgers, you used to fill all that out and put things down when it happened. Now you just debit card.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So you're not paying attention, you're not writing it down.
Not at all.
Most people don't even keep the receipts.
Yep.
So you have no idea how much money you spend, and it's crazy how much money you can spend in this country if you're not paying attention.
Yep.
Just on silly stuff. I mean, I like to carry cash just for that reason. Because if I break a 50, I have to consciously make that decision.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And then when it breaks, it's like, where'd it go?
Yep.
And you're going back, okay, I bought gas and I bought this little thing here, and it's like, wow, that's fast, right? And so really having a budget so this is how much we have set aside for X, and this is how much we have for food, this is how much we have for this, and then you track it to see if it actually is what happened, right? Because you can go into your statement and see, now if it's all just, money at the ATM, it's hard to know. But if you're buying stuff at the store, you can see what you're spending money on.
Yep.
Right? And start making conscious decisions.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the important part is like, if we're going to go like for step one, create a budget. I think, we live in this age where like now there's apps for budgets.
Right.
A really good one is NerdWallet. And it literally says, what are your expenses? What are your revenue that you're bringing in? And let's go through it and make sure that you're not spending more than what you're bringing in. Right. But also it really focuses on building assets and also focus on savings and and one of the big things is if say we are an 18-year-old person and you start your life insurance, you're looking at what, like $50 a month?
Oh, not even that.
Not even that.
Oh.
For the rest of you until you die.
Yeah.
So is $50 a month if you knew that no matter what, I have to pay that $50 first.
Right.
And then be like, no matter what, whatever 10% I bring in goes into savings.
Yeah.
And you make that a choice, that's a budget.
Yep. And other part, so you have the budget, and another thing is to understand value versus price.
Yes.
Right. So many folks get caught up in price, and I used to do this when I was when I was working for a company in the bed business. But you buy value; it lasts longer. Right. So you buy a great pair of boots. My older boy, does this. He'll spend $300 on a pair of boots, and his friends thought he was nuts when he was 18. Those boots lasted him for they're 8 years old.
Yeah.
You take care of them, right? Versus they're spending $60 or $50 on a pair, or $100 on a pair of boots that they've had to replace 3, 4, 5 times.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So it's understanding that I'm gonna spend more, but it's gonna last longer. So in the long run, I'm spending less.
Yes.
Right. So again, it's a conscious thing. And then the other piece that's really funny, we call them emergency funds, right? Because it's like certain things are gonna happen. Your tires are gonna go bad at some point. Right. So having to replace your tires isn't an emergency.
Yeah.
It's something you knew was gonna happen.
Exactly.
But if you don't plan for it, Then when they go bad, it's an emergency.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And what happens for most people is their emergency fund is their credit card.
Yeah, and and that's one of the biggest things. Is like I witnessed when I was in college, and I'm pretty sure when I first went to college or when I first graduated, it was literally the conversation of like, hey, would you like to get your first credit card? And like my mom was like, don't get a credit card because you don't know what's going to happen. And I was like, and on top of that, you'll just max it out and then you ruin your credit and all these things. And so, I think we have trauma that's in our community, mainly from us. I mean, I would say that maybe your generation or a generation before you, and even my generation, we're all traumatized by the idea of like, we maxed out our credit card, our credit's ruined, and it's so hard to unbury ourselves.
Yes.
So, the difference between debt and credit is super important. And I think that's something that we should really talk about. So what's the difference?
Yep. Well, and I think what's interesting, and this is, you talk about living beyond your means, right? We think about something, so someone buys something on a credit card, right? And they spend whatever, $500 on it, but they only have to pay $40 a month. Well, they couldn't afford the $500.
Yeah.
But they could afford the $40 a month, so they feel like they're living within their means.
Yep, of course.
Right?
Of course.
And then all of a sudden, you start just getting more and more debt, credit card debt, whatever other kinds of debt, because it fits into your budget, but you're not buying things. You're just accumulating more debt.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
So that's not necessarily a good route.
Of course.
Right. The other side of that is, and people talking about building credit. Right. There are people who do this, and you have to again watch the process. But let's say you go to a department store and you want to get a new TV. Well, you got the money to buy the TV.
Of course.
But you go ahead and get the department store credit card.
Yep.
Right? And then you just pay it off. So then you're building credit, but you already had the money on the side.
For sure.
That's two very different ways of getting things, right?
And I think to delve a little bit deeper into that, I think when it comes to credit cards, people don't understand it is meant to be a tool. It is a way for when credit cards were first implemented, it was really a way for people to understand that like the term giving you credit for it. The idea of like you're good for this money, that you will pay your debt, and that like you may not have it now, but if people are willing to be patient, they can give you that, and that ability to increase that amount is due to good usage of credit. And I think you can't do a lot of things. You can't buy a house without credit. You can't buy a car without credit. You could buy it if you had it all in full, but like if say you're building assets, right. And it's a good time to buy, and you are like, well, I might not have it now, but if you run my credit, it will show that I will eventually have it.
Right. Well, and I think it's important too to think about what are you buying on credit. To your point, right? Buying a car, $30,000 cash, even $20,000, even $15,000 cash is a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
So that's a different game. Appliances, right? $2,000, $3,000 for your refrigerator, your stove, whatever. That's a lot of money. So those are things that were initially thought of as credit. What happened then is people started, just buying everything from a piece of, some clothes and some this and some that, and they just started piling on things that really weren't large purchases. They were just convenient purchases.
Exactly.
And so there's a difference in mentality as far as that goes too. And to your point though about not building credit, if you don't build credit, I had a good friend that went years, paid all his bills, paid everything off, but never got any credit cards and wanted to buy a house and to your point, couldn't get a house.
Yep.
He eventually worked it out, but it was really difficult. He had to go start over, like just buying things literally on credit just so he could create credit, so he could because it wasn't like he had bad credit.
No.
He literally had no credit.
Yeah.
Like there was none of the reported citizens had anything on him.
Yeah.
And he's like 40 years old. They're like, first of all, how's that even possible, right?
Yeah.
But it harms. So you have to be able to control that process yourself, right? You can't rent a car without a credit card.
For sure.
There's only like one or two places will rent you a car if you don't have a credit card. Not a debit card, but an actual credit card.
Yes.
So there's things that you have to be able to
For
do.
sure, and we're not saying these things are fair. I think it's just a game, and I think when we're having to play the game, we need to you have to set ourselves up for success.
Yes.
And if it means that we have to, spend a year putting, using our credit card for gas and paying it off every month in order to get that 800 credit score, or whatever credit score that you need to do to be able to build your assets or to become financially independent. That's very necessary. So I think when people think of debt, they think of like a negative thing. They think like, oh well, you just don't know how to take care of your finances, or like you're borrowing from everybody, and and I think people think debt as a really negative thing, and it can be.
Yes.
And I think when we talk about living beyond your means, that is a way to create negative debt.
Well, and I think to your point too, it's all about what you've learned growing up, right? And so if everyone the only time they had debt was bad, then the debt's bad.
Yep.
Right? And we're going to talk further on about leveraging debt and all that, and later on. And that's like, no, there are people that take full advantage of it, and that's the whole point. Is to again, it's a game.
Yep.
And the challenge of any game is if you don't know the rules, you're not going to do very well.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you play football and you show up without pads, it's going to be a real long day.
Exactly.
Well, it's going to be a real short day.
It's going to be a really short day.
You're going to last long, right?
Yeah.
So it's that kind of understanding that you have, and who teaches the game, and the people that know the rules aren't necessarily interested in teaching everyone else the game.
Of course. Of course, which I think that is one of the big things that can hurt people, and I think this is why these conversations are super important to have with everybody. So we talked about creating a budget, which for those of you on watching this, we will put an actual spreadsheet for you to actually create your own budget, which I think that's going to be super helpful. Yes. Because if you can put on paper what you're spending and what you are making, and you can see it and you can actually understand it, I think that's super important. There are some experts that can help with debt consolidation, helping people get out of debt. And sometimes it's also a situation where you probably have to go into maybe getting professional help, which I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But let's talk a little bit about the usage of money, which I think we talk about saving versus buying.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think that's probably one of the biggest hurdles, because I mean, if you remember, we talked about retirement, people think that investing is spending.
Yep.
And I think that's where we can change a lot of things if we really focus on what are the what is the importance of saving, what is the importance of what we buy, and how can we build a better relationship with those things.
Yep. And I think that the thing that I learned a long time ago is pay yourself first. We don't even think of it that way, right? So you think of investing, you think of this money I don't get, I don't have, right? It's like you're taking my money away, right?
Yep.
Because we're in this consumer-minded society, and I said, well, if you want to be a great consumer, do you want to be a good consumer 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 50 years from now, right? Do you want to know that you got something to consume, that you have the money to consume things then? That's why we invest now, right? But the idea is pay yourself first. And especially if you have, again, we talk about the 401k, where your money is, you're not paying off, you're avoiding having to pay taxes on it at the time, which means the money accumulates without taxes, which means if, let's say you were at a 40% tax bracket and you had $1,000, that means you're investing 1,000 versus investing 600.
Yeah.
And that money's growing, every 1,000 is growing, not 600 every time you do it. So it's a huge benefit there. Plus your company then matches, right? So by paying yourself first, you're setting up, and it's a habit. And then whatever you have left over, then you live on.
For sure.
But the first thing you do is pay yourself.
So I think a really good tool for this is really writing down and putting down on a piece of paper is what are ways we can pay ourselves. And I think we talk about savings.
Yes.
We talk about life insurance.
Yes.
We talk about investing. And what else? What else?
I think invest in yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things that a lot of people get out of school and they're like, oh, I'm done, I'm never learning another thing kind of attitude, right? And it's because for most of us, school is not a good experience. Right? But learning should be. And knowledge is power, right? Applied knowledge, as they say, right? And so what are you excited about? What are you interested in? What can you learn on your own that can improve, who you are and how valuable you can be as far as, again, trying to make money, right? I mean, if you have, maybe college isn't your thing. okay, that isn't a thing for a lot of people.
No,
right?
yeah.
And I know, and some of the people that I know that have been most successful didn't go to college.
Yep.
So don't, that right? But if you don't know what you're doing, it's harder to run. But so what do you like? What do you enjoy? What can you learn that way? So invest in yourself, seminars, books. In fact, it was interesting. I was talking with my older son. He listens, he's very busy.
Yeah.
Right, but he listens a lot. He listens to a lot of books,
Audiobooks. That's the only way I can read books.
Huge. I mean,
Oh yeah.
every time you're in your car, how much time do you spend in your car? I remember when I was years ago when I first started getting into sales, and I'd listen to sales training cassette tapes.
Yep.
In my car, right? Just doing it. It's like I'm in my car for hours a day. I can either be learning something or listening to crud.
Yeah.
Use proper language, right? I'm going to be learning something, right? So how do you invest in yourself? We talk about, again, being a consultant or later on in life kind of things. What things can you do when you're young and energetic and have a lot of extra time, right? You don't
Yep.
have a family and children and things hold, that are sucking up energy and time
Yep.
that you can then use to improve and move yourself. The other one, especially for young people, is travel.
Yeah.
That's an investment in yourself. And it makes you valuable, especially in our society now where everything's international.
Yep.
To be able to go to an organization and say, well, I've been in these countries before and
Yeah.
you're only 20. They're like, really? Right?
For sure.
That sets you apart, one, because you made those choices, but two, you have those experiences. My older son did an internship in Japan. I've never been to Japan, and he's been in Japan. He got paid to
Yeah.
live in Japan.
Yeah.
Right? And that experience, astronomical, huge,
For
right?
sure.
We took him to Europe when he was young, and I think is really why he became an architect, because he got to see these old buildings that were built, and you look in the cornerstones, he's like, there's no way that building was built in 1400, da-da-da. I'm like, that's what this thing says.
Hey.
And he's like, we can't build buildings in America that last 50 years, and they got buildings.
Exactly.
And it just totally, right? So it just opens his mind into what's possible. And so you don't even know what you're going to learn when you go places, right? So I
Yeah.
think that's a huge investment. And I had a lady say this to me one time, and it was funny because people say, well, traveling is expensive. Well, how much do they pay? How much like this super expensive pair of Nikes now are like $300-400, right? You can get almost to Europe for a little over that.
Yeah.
Right? You start looking at prices and timing it right. So it's not like you don't have the money, it's what are you doing with the money?
Exactly.
You got to eat, whether you're America or England, you're still going to eat.
Exactly.
So the only thing is how do you get over that?
Exactly. And I think that's one of the big things that we talk about, we talk about buying. Like, what are we spending our money on? And I think one of the big things is we get in this routine of comfort. And when we don't have a budget, we do, and you said it yourself, we get in this habit of like, put my credit card on the little thing, boom, it's gone. Like and you might even be like, there's been times where, I'll be out with friends and we're having a great time and like that, and I was just like, it's on the card and everything like that. And the night you get a $200 bill,
Right,
and you're just like, what happened? And I think it's a very good analogy to how we have our relationship with money in everyday life. We sit there and we have fun, we go out, we're busy, we're not if we're not paying attention to our money, it can very well be a situation where this month you spent $400 more than what you actually have,
Right.
and you're wondering, how am I going to make rent?
Right.
I've been there. I personally have done that, and
Or-
it's just like it's poor choices.
Right. Or the debit card, doesn't have enough, so you just switch it with the credit card.
Exactly.
You're like, I'll get to it, right? So then you spend, $100 on dinner or whatever and had a great time, and then spend the next 20 years paying it off.
For sure.
And all that interest. And all that stuff.
So when it comes to buying things, I think creating a really healthy habit of whether are you using a credit card to build credit, or using it as a tool, or you're using it as a get out of jail free card.
Right.
It's like, and I think that's really how we should really think about it. It's just like, okay, I only use I'm going to take myself as an example. I use my credit card to pay my rent. I use it to pay for things that I know are expenses. So like rent, my food, my gas, my insurance, all goes in there. And then what I do is I take my paycheck and pay it off.
Right.
Because I know that if I do it the other way, where I take it out of my debit card, and I'm just going to pay it, and I won't get any additional thing. I won't get my rewards points. Nope. I won't get any like building of my credit. So like, I think that's kind of like the relationship we should start really thinking about is like, how are you using your money and how can we leverage to build how can you use your money better? Right. And I think, if you have a problem such as like you just have an impulse where you buy things and then we're talking about mental health, like now you're a dependent on, well, if I'm out, I'm gonna spend whatever because I'm having fun, and this experience is worth me going into debt, right. Which I don't think people see it that way, no. but it's the reality of it.
Right. That's what they're living, and I think you made a point about is the credit card a tool, right? Or literally is the bank using you as the tool?
Hey, there you go.
Right. I mean, it's one or the other, and we're gonna get into some things where we're gonna show how compound interest works, and it's gonna be kind of shocking.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I think definitely understanding where what is your relationship with money, and saying like, okay, I know that if I don't see it, I will overspend it. Yes. And part of creating a budget is also looking back, is really digging up like, okay, so here's my budget, and these are my expenses. I mean, even if you just did a general like, this is how much I spent this month, and this month. 3 months back. Yep. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I spent $200 more, $300 more, $400. How did that happen?
Right. And to your point too, where did I spend it? Either A, because it's all on your card, or B, you don't know.
Exactly.
Because you just took out cash. Yep. And at least if you know, you might be a little frustrated, but at least you know. If you don't know, that's even more scary.
Yeah.
Really and I think that's the challenge sometimes when you think about like the weekend or the out and the party and whatever, it's like, you had a great time, but 2 weeks from now, maybe even 2 days from now, you even remember what you did.
Yep.
The bill's still going to be coming though.
Yep.
Right, and I think that's the key.
Well, so I guess really understanding that like we have to have discipline when it comes to a budget. And I think no one really talks about that part, which is the in between. People think like if I have a budget and I follow the budget, I will get a really good retirement. I'll have legacy. I'll have assets and all these blah blah blah. But they really don't talk about like the in-between where it's just like, oh my gosh, like I have like to be disciplined. I have to live within my means. It means also maybe I have to sacrifice and be like, I can't live in this apartment anymore. Or I have to find a roommate, or maybe I have to not buy really fancy clothes and go to JCPenney's from now on for X amount of time.
I'll tell you a funny story along those lines, and we can then move on to that. Yeah. But this is a great segue to the next piece too. So I was doing financial services, and I'm helping this client, and they have 2 car payments. They got an SUV, like an Escalade, and they have like this Audi or something, right? So their car payments are $500 a month and $300 a month. So they're spending $800 a month on car payments. But when I tell them they need to invest money to pay off their debt, they're like, well, we don't have any money. I said, well, let's just say, for example, we get rid of this one car payment. It's $300 a month, right? How much could you sell that car for? And they're like, well, probably $5,000 or $6,000. I said, could you buy a car? This is back in like the 90s, right? Could you buy a car cash that can get you from A to B for that $6,000? Well, yeah. Okay, then now we just found your $300 a month. Oh, I can't do that. Right?
It's uncomfortable.
Right? It's like, but I'm not going to be living, but that's not who I am. That car isn't who I am, right?
Yep.
And so they literally were just like, nope. And I'm like, okay, that's your choice, but you're making a choice.
For sure.
About your future based on the fact that you really have, you still keep the Escalade.
For sure.
You still got that beautiful Escalade that you're paying $500 a month for. I didn't tell you to get rid of that.
Yep.
Just move off of this one and get something, 10 years older or 5 years older.
Exactly.
And so again, to your point of discipline, you just got to make that choice that my future is more important than this one thing in my present. Because we're not talking about sacrificing everything. It's just one thing.
Yep. And I think I'm going to quote a really good rapper, Logic. He says, I sacrificed my 20s so money ain't a thing when I'm in my 30s. And I think that's what really it comes down to is like sometimes, living a certain lifestyle where it is very simple and it is not about, flashy things or it's really I'm going to grind for the next 10 years and do everything I can to build up my financial independence so that maybe at 35 you could retire.
Right.
Like if you knew that like you wouldn't be getting manicures, you wouldn't be getting your hair done, you wouldn't be eating at fancy places, you wouldn't be getting the nice cars, you wouldn't have all those things, but after 10 years you'd be rewarded with all that you wanted
For the rest of your life.
for the rest of your life. Would it be worth it? And no one really brings that idea.
And it's not even, and this is the thing that I think, it's not even that they're not going to get the manicures, they're just only going to do it once a quarter versus once a month.
Exactly.
Right? Or once a month versus once a week.
Or they learn how to do themselves.
Oh, right? Again.
You know.
It's all how you, it's that incremental change.
For sure. So I think one of the things we talked about is like we really wanted the end of this video is to have a plan and like kind of go over like a idea of like this is what these are some steps you can do moving forward that can be impactful and that you can literally use it as a tool to get you to where you want to be. If you're 18, if you are 30, if you're 40, even if you're 50, if you start doing this can get you a lot further along than where the trajectory you are. So the first thing we talked about was start a budget. So like I said, we gave you guys a template that you guys can download. Create your own budget. If you're better with apps, if you're better with a consultant, get help. Whatever you need to do, you need to figure out, are you living in your means? And if you are not, then you need to identify the things you need to cut and at least live neutral, where like at least you are not making a profit, but you're not going into debt. Exactly. Next from there is start saving. So like, whether it's putting money, 10% of your income into a savings account, and doing a Roth IRA or an IRA, whether it's into investing in yourself and learning a new skill, life insurance, get it young so you don't have to pay more later because it can be very scary. I mean, I'm looking at it and it's like I think it's like $110 now for me.
To go up. Yep.
And it's worth it. And again, when we think about saving, it is you are paying your future self.
Yes.
So investing in your future self is super important, and that should be your next thing in your mind. Even if you can't afford to do it today,
right.
What are the
Still
things that you
list.
want to do?
Yep.
You can put it on a dream board. You can put it in your journal and say like, starting next year, I'm gonna make sure that I have this budget, and then starting next year or starting in 6 months, this is my goal, and this is what I'm gonna do. Look at your debt. There's free credit reports now. There's Credit Karma. There's, it's become like over the last 6 years, it has become very easy to keep track of what's in your credit, keep track of what's in your debt, what you owe, how you owe it, what your interest percent in. And I think, when it comes to getting rid of debt, I think that's a video we can definitely talk about that.
For sure.
So looking at your debt, identifying it, I think that's super important. And then deciding on something that you wish to learn. And I think that hit me the most because when I first started my career, I thought I was gonna be a chef forever. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh man, I'm gonna be a chef, I'm gonna have my own restaurant and everything like that. And then I started a nonprofit. And you know what I had to do? I had to learn how to start a nonprofit. And then eventually, I found that I was loving photography. And then what I had to do? I learned how to be a photographer. And like, it's just one of those things that like, we can't be stuck in this idea that we will never learn or things will never change. I think it's super important that like, to learn another skill. I mean, a really, a crazy thing that's happened is like, what if there's a situation where your entire, a really good example, coal mining. Mm-hmm. What if right now we're at the point where like coal mining is going to be gone.
Right.
So like, do you have the ability to learn a new skill?
Yeah.
Or what would happen if you lost your legs? You can't be a coal miner. No. You can't do a lot of things.
Yeah, a lot of
so
stuff
like
changes.
You need to. So a lot of things changes. I think it's super important to have a secondary skill, to have a secondary passion.
Well, I think that's the piece, is the passion, right? I mean, I think the problem for most people with learning is when you say learning, they think school.
Yep.
And the first thing they do is, done.
Yep.
School was awful. I hated the teachers. I hated right? Versus learning being, what do you love to do, and what would you love to be able to do better? Mm-hmm. Or what have you thought that you wanted to do that you're like, nah, I could never do that? Yeah, maybe you could.
Yeah.
And it's inch by inch, it's a cinch, right? Just start a little bit and see what you can get to. But I think that keeps folks motivated and excited, right? Because again, a lot of people's jobs are not that's not their passion. It's what pays their bills.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of the conversations that I think we should definitely bring into have a session about passion.
Yes.
Because that's mental, that's financial, that's everything. Because I tell you what, if you found something you're really passionate about and you do it every day, you will get paid a lot of money to do it if you're very passionate about it. Like it is also a situation where you will also find the least amount of stress. Yeah. You will find the fact that like your health will be better because you're not doing something that you don't want to do. If you every day you wake up and you're doing something that you want to do, or at least getting you towards where you want to be, it's worth it. Yeah. So I think that's super huge. All right, so that is the end of the second video. I hope you guys like, share, and comment down below. We're gonna send all the details of Entre and everything like that. And we're gonna get right into the third part. Make sure, again, you share, like, and comment, and tell us what you think. Is any of this stuff that we're talking about helping? How is your retirement plan going? Tell us about your budget, things that you're worried about, and we would love to come back to you guys. So see you guys in a little bit. Hope you enjoyed the third video.